For almost 2 years, South Africa was on the Financial Asset Task Force grey list, basically a global watch list for countries seen as high risk for money laundering and terror financing. The status hurt us. It made it harder and more expensive to move money across borders. It raised red flags for investors and it damaged our credibility in global finance. South Africa has now been removed from that grey list after completing all 22 actions demanded by the Financial Action Task Force, including tightening oversight on illicit financial flows, improving beneficial ownership, transparency, and strengthening the Financial Intelligence Centre and enforcement capacity. And joining us is the Chief Executive Officer of the South African Institute of Chartered Accountants, Patricia Stock. Patricia, great to speak to you this morning. Now, let's start simply for the viewers. In plain language, what is the FATF and what is it that they had mandated us to do to come off this grey list?
Thank you, Hugo. Good morning to you and the viewers, rather. The FATF is a Financial Action Task Force, which we are part of in South Africa. So what they do is they do a review of different countries to look at the measures in place to ensure that we comply with the key requirements of enabling compliance, especially that we are to ensure that we are trusted as a country in relation to our financial systems. So in the review that they did in 2023, they found quite a number of areas where we needed to strengthen our processes. And I'm just going to highlight a few of those areas that they found for us to work on. One of the key findings in relation to beneficial ownership was around the fact that we lacked adequate mechanisms in place to ensure that we can have timely and accurate access to beneficial information. And in addition to the enforcement and verification processes, we found to be lacking in terms of what we did. So what needed to be done was to ensure that, for example, CIPC and Master's Office as well put additional measures in place to ensure that we can close that gap. But that needed a broader ecosystem to partner to enable us to address that weakness that was identified. So that's why with us, even the role of the profession was so critical, because our members are in the SME space, they run in different businesses, they're consulting. So they were very key to enable this level of compliance that we needed to reach in terms of updating the CIPC records for beneficial ownership. I'm sure South Africans, those that are having businesses of any size for that matter, they would have seen the increased communication from CIPC and requirements for us to update our records in relation to beneficial ownership. So that was really for us to ensure that we can meet the compliance requirements. Another area was in relation to trust and company services providers, where it was found that accountable institutions as well were not fully covered or supervised under the anti-money laundering and counter-terrorist processes that needed to be in place. So what we needed to do was to ensure that accountants, because they were also found to be in a key group to enable this level of compliance, that there were measures in place that we, that we could also introduce as a country to strengthen the level of compliance in this area as well. So what needed to be done was to ensure that we can look at practical examples that we can build into our laws and regulations in relation to AML and then CFT in this regard. So like I said, it's 22 areas. So some of them is around reporting suspicious and unusual transactions, the weak supervision that was found in relation to designated financial businesses and professions as well, that needed to ensure that we play an active role in ensuring that there is supervision and enforcement when we find areas of non-compliance. But today we're celebrating a win that took a broader ecosystem to get us to this point where we can be off the grey listing as a nation. And that is key to enable increase of capital flows into the country and improve our status as well as a desired destination of choice when it comes to investments.
Well, it's great that we're celebrating this win, if you will. Now, what risks could potentially drag us back onto that list?
Look, if we do not do enough to ensure that we can invest in sustaining these wins, of course we can find ourselves to be at risk in relation to this. So what we need to do is to ensure that yes, we've overcome this headwinds. You know, how do we ensure that we invest into ensuring that we've got strengthening of our, for example, the beneficial ownership on an ongoing basis, because we get businesses coming in, you know, new businesses coming in on an ongoing basis, but also it's a continuous compliance requirement, especially when things change as time goes. But and also we need to ensure that even as a collective as well as a nation, that we've got a culture of compliance. Because I mean, to get to this point, it's not because of the role of government alone, especially when you look at the key role players like National Treasury, FIC, CIPC, SAPS as an example, and MPA that worked in collaboration together with business, especially the financial services and the profession, as I've indicated. What we need a nation that has a culture of compliance. You know, just keep our records clean, ensure that there's transparency and that we're truthful in our way of work and how we engage, and especially around the disclosure. I mean, some of the areas, for example, looking at the politically exposed people, that we need to ensure that they are disclosed. There's transparency in terms of who we do business with. You know, some of the areas that we need to ensure that there is adequate records that are actually maintained as well. So it starts with the citizens as individuals and citizens as in corporate citizens as well. And as businesses, we need to ensure that we continue to implement these requirements. But to get these requirements in place, we also need to ensure that we've got the right capabilities from a human capital and systems perspectives. And that's why it's important that continuous investment in upskilling and investing in the right systems in our various organizations is going to be so critical going forward. The government, of course, needs to continue to strengthen the regulatory requirements in this regard. And our profession, we have a critical role to play. And in fact, is a global focus, even at the International Federation of Accountants, IFAC level, we're focusing on AML to ensure that even as a profession, we understand our duties, but we go beyond understanding, ensure that we drive the implementation of AML-related regulations in our various jurisdictions. This is key to ensure that as a profession of the accountancy profession, we enable the necessary guardrails and compliance on an ongoing basis. And our role as SAICA is to ensure that we invest in the right collaborations with government and business to enable these guardrails that I'm referring to.
Patricia, in the introduction, we talked about the FATF, right? Basically being a global watch list for countries seen as high risk for money laundering and terror financing, which doesn't necessarily suggest perpetration, but it speaks to the potential of that perpetration. So in the instance of South Africa and the issues that we had to correct, how much of it was the potential of terror financing or the potential of money laundering versus actual instances where this has occurred?
Yeah, so we'll have to get the data points in relation to the extent in which we would have had instances of anti-money laundering in terms of AML. So then we need to get the data points around it. But as long as you've got a gap, the probability of instances of transactions in relation to AML is an example. It means that there is a probability. So hence I'm saying that let's also get the right data points from the relevant oversight bodies that I've also mentioned earlier on. If you look at some of the findings as an example, I mean, if you've got issues around weaknesses in monitoring, controls that we need to ensure that they are in place. So that means that as a country, we are definitely exposed to, those who may be looking at finding transactions or South Africa as a means to, have anti-money laundering activities, then we were largely exposed in this instance. So that's why even FATF would then look at what controls do you have in place, not necessarily the extent in which the transactions have occurred. So they focus on that, and obviously if those transactions have occurred, then it exacerbates our position as well in terms of the market trust. to be able to do business with us as a country.
Now, if you were to give me a headline for ordinary people watching at home, will getting off the grey list make life easier, make loans cheaper, and how? Attract more investment, or is that all oversold?
Yes, absolutely. And we've already seen the benefits thereof with improvement in the market sentiments and the strengthening of the rand. And that speaks to affordability. I mean, when we talk about the value chain, especially those that are in business, SMEs that are running their businesses, I mean, the cost of input as well, we see that it will translate into that level of improvement in terms of enjoying the benefits across the full value chain in business, but then also in terms of making it easier and cheaper for citizens that are working overseas, for example, to send money home. And that speaks to those that maybe in South Africa, you have struggled in the past to receive money from your loved ones from overseas. We see that it should be able to at least ease off that challenge as well. And what we also anticipate is new investments by foreign companies to flow into the country. We know unemployment rate is extremely high as a country. That's why we need more investments to flow into our country. And that is not without potential. It's because South Africa, we've got so much to offer in various sectors of our different industries in South Africa. And what we also anticipate is that this actually is restoring the confidence in South Africans' financial integrity and governance that we stand for as a country. We stand for good governance as well. And that's why the role of different role players was so key to ensure that we can restore that confidence in our markets as well. So the cost of debt has been also one of the key outcomes of being on the grey list. So we also anticipate that over time, we should see the cost of debt also coming down in the long term. But what we anticipate is really that let's build on this win. Let's ensure that at least we can attract and have better investor and lender confidence so that we can improve the capital flows into our country.
Patricia, great speaking to you as always. Patricia Stock, Chief Executive Officer of the South African Institute of Chartered Accountants.